How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Hey, how's it going? TG Geek here, back here again. Today, I have a Ryzen 7 mini PC from our good friends over at Wowie. Shout out to Wowie for sending another review unit. These reviews aren't sponsored, paid for, and you're seeing them before they are. All they're doing is providing the unit, but big shout out to them for providing it, making this video possible. Moving on, here is our unit here. The box is pretty much identical to the box for the A9 9400 model, and the actual mini PC itself is identical to the A9 9400 model as far as the case and shell. So this one comes with Windows 11 Pro. So this is a 3rd gen Ryzen 7 unit, and I've taken a look at a 5th gen Ryzen 5 unit. But this unit, even though it is older, has Vega 10 as opposed to Vega 7. So theoretically, the graphics should be more powerful, but I believe the CPU is clocked lower, so we'll definitely test out some game performance later. But let's crack open this box. So getting into the box, we have the actual mini PC on the right, and our accessory box on the left. So getting at the mini PC here, you can see that it's basically identical to the A9 mini PC, which is about $100, and this one is a little over twice that. The A9 model was definitely a budget entry-level unit, and this Ryzen model is definitely a higher-end, much more competitive unit. So we're working with 8 gigs of RAM, a 256 SSD, and the Ryzen 7. But everything is upgradable, including the RAM, the SSD, and you can add a hard drive. Now, the only thing that I would maybe do differently is include 16 gigs of RAM out of the box, because with this unit in particular, I feel like most people are going to want to upgrade to 16 anyway. Now, their Ryzen 5 unit does have 16 gigs of RAM, but this Ryzen 7 unit that's a little cheaper doesn't, because it's a last gen one, I'm assuming. You can upgrade it yourself. If anything were to be done differently, I'd maybe think about making this unit available with 16 or 8 from the factory. But yeah, very similar unit to the A9 unit. And the power adapter is very large. Like, look at this. This is absolutely massive. So it's about the size of the power adapter for the Ryzen 5 unit, but much bigger than the other units like the A9 unit. So this Ryzen 7 unit, it's palm sized like all the other ones, and boasts pretty high performance. We're looking at 4 cores and 4 threads at 2.3 gigahertz with a boost of 4 gigahertz, as well as the Radeon Vega graphics built in. While this isn't as powerful as the Ryzen 5000 unit that I've taken a look at already, this is definitely a good mid-range unit that includes the amenities such as a SSD and a Ryzen processor, but at a very reasonable entry-level price for a Ryzen computer. So let's get to some gaming. So here we are on the desktop of the Ryzen 7 mini PC. Comes pre-installed with Windows 11. I've installed a few applications just to test out today, but overall bloatware is minimal and really doesn't come with any unnecessary applications. So going into Task Manager here. So we have our CPU, which is 4 core, 8 thread, and it can boost up to around 4 gigahertz. 8 gigabytes of RAM at 2667 megahertz. This is our SSD, our 256 gigabyte drive, Wi-Fi, and then our Radeon graphics that are built in, which are Vega 10. Which, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure the number after Vega just means the number of cores dedicated to the GPU. So Vega 10 is 10 core, Vega 7 is 7 core. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure that's what this means right here. So while some of the other mini PCs, such as the Celeron and A9 units, were basically just for web browsing, and, web browsing was, testing out if you could do it, whatever, there is absolutely no issue with this mini PC and web browsing. May as well come up here. Put a little video going. So, yep, there's the ad, but video's going. Absolutely no issue there. And how about we put this over here and then go to Amazon. Wowie mini PC. Oops. So yeah, multitasking for this computer right here, absolutely not a problem at all. This mini PC is actually pretty capable. So, and of course, if we bring up Task Manager, skip this ad. If we bring up Task Manager, you can see that the CPU is nowhere near being maxed out. So we're only about 30 to 40% right now. And the real bottleneck here would be RAM or memory. You only have 8 gigabytes out of the box. Now you can absolutely upgrade it. There are 2 slots. I'll throw up a clip of upgrading the A9 mini PC because it's the exact same procedure, but you can get a 16 gigabyte kit, 3200 megahertz or whatever speed you desire of DDR4 RAM and put it in. And we're not doing too much here. So for gaming, you absolutely will want 16 gigabytes or more because the graphics down here actually uses this memory. It doesn't have its own memory. So that's something to be aware of. Upgrading the RAM is like 20, 30 bucks, but I feel like it would be a nice option from the factory so the end user wouldn't have to do it themselves. But that's about really my only complaint so far, or constructive criticism, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, this thing, no problem web browsing. You can go through videos, websites, have tons of tabs, doesn't lag behind, whatever. That's to be expected. The real test comes in with gaming. So first game that I want to test out here is Terraria. Terraria is really easy to run. You can run it on almost any computer, and it's something that I've been playing recently personally, so I just wanted to give it a shot on this mini PC. I have no doubts that this will run well, considering that Terraria was on the Xbox 360 and such, but this is just an example of the type of gaming performance you can expect on, very optimized, low-resolution graphics, type games. Alright, so it took about 20 to 30 seconds to make the world, which isn't bad at all. So now we're in the world here. And as far as graphics settings, we're at 1080p, full screen, quality, auto, background on, blood and gore on, wave quality high, windy environment enabled. So not a lot of graphics options for Terraria, but everything's turned up basically. And we're getting a pretty solid 60 FPS. The frame time and temperature and everything is on screen for you to view yourself. But right now, GPU is sitting at about 53 degrees, which is really cool. And we're getting a solid 60 FPS. And now we can see that almost 6 gigabytes of our 8 gigabytes of RAM is being utilized, which is really concerning. Because once you run out of RAM, then your game starts stuttering and stuff just doesn't run as good. So adding more RAM to the system would simply just afford you a few more frames or a few more tabs on Google, however you want to look at it. But I feel like it's almost necessary for a computer like this. But Terraria, you're getting a solid 60 FPS. Really not much to say about this, but if you want to play this on this mini PC, you're perfectly set up. So the next game that I wanted to test out was Subnautica. While it is an older game, it's a game that can run on some lower end hardware, so I just wanted to give it a shot on this mini PC. So as far as settings, we're working with 720p, all low settings, and we're able to get consistently over 30 FPS, but we can't quite hit that 60 FPS mark. So I would probably personally lock it to 30, but our GPU utilization is at 100%, but we still have a good bit of CPU processing, and it settled in at a pretty cool 61, 62 degrees on the GPU and CPU respectively. But yeah, we're getting a solid 30 to 40 frames a second, which I would consider playable. Turning this up to medium makes it drop into the 20s, so the low preset at 720p is the only way to play this game. So the graphics aren't absolute best in the world because obviously it's on the low 720p, but whenever you compare this to running on something like the Nintendo Switch, this is 200 bucks, and I mean, it's also a computer. You can do work on it and all sorts of stuff. But if you do want to play a little bit of games, it can do it as well. Alright, so we're going to up the ante a little bit and go to a much more difficult game to run. Next up is Doom Eternal. You can upgrade the RAM and probably be fine with Doom Eternal, but out of the box, it seems that you're running out of RAM and Doom Eternal is unplayable. I don't know if the frame rate would be playable anyway if you got it running, but it will not open out of the box. So now we're trying Skyrim, 1080p, all low settings. This is Skyrim Special Edition, by the way, the one with the enhanced graphics, so the frame rate will be a little worse than the OG version of Skyrim. So Skyrim, all low settings at 1080p, we're getting in the 20s, not even hitting that 30 FPS mark, dipping into the teens, which I would definitely not consider playable. Frame times are pretty abysmal too, and the GPU is whacked up to 100% usage. So let's try dropping this to 720p and seeing what it does. So after dropping that down to 720p, we're still in all low settings. We're able to get pretty consistent 30 to 40 FPS, most importantly staying pretty much above the 30 FPS mark, and Just leave it just like that and just have a playable experience and play Skyrim on your mini computer, which 10 years ago would have been unfathomable, but this game has been released so many times over the years. So I'd say this is pretty playable. And while not particularly the smoothest experience, I would definitely say that this is playable and acceptable. So GPU whacked out at 100%, CPU around 30%. CPU has a lot more power left to it. So if you wanted to do video encoding or streaming or whatever off of the CPU, you could probably stream on this PC while gaming on it. But I wouldn't do encoding with the GPU since the GPU is maxed out right now. But temperatures on Skyrim have settled in at a reasonable 62 degrees. I expected this chip to be in the 70 to 80 range, but it's actually doing pretty good. The last title that I'm going to be testing out here today is Portal 2. Portal 2 just runs remarkably well on older hardware. The Celeron mini PC was able to run this at a smooth 60 FPS, so I expect this mini PC to do just the same. So under video, we have 1080p, windowed, no border, power saving disabled. And then all of this is on high, very high, basically the highest settings. And there we are, now we're in Portal 2. So on absolute maximum settings, Portal 2 runs in the 40 FPS range. And now we're around the 60s, I guess it just depends. And drop back down to the 40s. So at max settings, you can get over 30 FPS, definitely more than playable. Now max settings at 720p. Max settings at 720p as opposed to 1080p. You're running 60 plus FPS all day. As opposed to doing a lower resolution, you can do lower graphic settings at 1080p and get 60 plus FPS at 1080p. So can't have the graphics max out at 1080p, but graphics max out at 720 definitely grants you a nice 60 plus FPS. We're seeing anywhere from the 70 to 90 range on average. And yeah, Portal 2 passed with flying colors. So that's all the games that I'm going to be testing and all the benchmarks that I'm going to be doing for today. So my verdict on this Ryzen 7 3750H mini PC is that it's really powerful for the price. At the price of about a Switch Lite, you're getting performance that is more than that of a Nintendo Switch, right? About $200. You're getting a Ryzen APU, 8 gigs of RAM, and a SSD. And unlike a Switch, you can do all sorts of things from video editing to streaming to emulation to gaming. This thing's actually a pretty beefy powerhouse. Not as much as the 5600U unit that I've recently taken a look at, but it definitely takes the cake for being second place in the most powerful mini PCs that I've taken a look at. So really, my only complaint with this unit, I had small complaints about the first few units that I've taken a look at, saying that I wanted a little more power or whatever. This unit's fine. It's snappy, you have the SSD, everything comes up quick, everything loads quick, it turns on quick, no lag, awesome. As far as speed and performance, it's perfect. But the fact that it comes with 8 gigs of RAM, and the Vega graphics basically uses all of that, it would be much smarter to have a 16 gig option from the factory. In a future video, I will throw 16 gigs of RAM in this and reattempt to run some games, see what the performance is, see if there's any marginal differences, etc. But there were games that would crash and just straight up would not open because of the 8 gigs of RAM that was shared between the CPU and GPU. So, Wowie, I know you're always listening for feedback. My feedback for this unit is potentially for whatever amount it is, $20, $30 more. If you would be able to offer a version that came with the extra stick of RAM already installed, that would make it a marginally better product. So, thank you to Wowie for entrusting me with yet another review unit with my little small rinky channel here. And yeah, thank you all for stopping by. Thank you, Wowie, for the review unit, as always. So in the near future, I feel like it would be good to look into the impacts of the 8 gigs of RAM that it comes with versus 16. So in the future, I'll make an entire video about benchmarking and performance testing this mini PC with 8 gigs versus 16 gigs of RAM to see whether you really need 16 gigs of RAM in 2023. Now, from the fact that I couldn't get many of the games that I installed to open, the answer is yes. But I'm sure all of you, just like me, are wondering how significant is the change of adding 8 more gigs of RAM, especially to a mini PC like this one with the APU. So, thank you all for stopping by. Sorry about the gap in upload schedule. Life happens. I can make up a really good excuse if you want me to, but yeah, that's all I got. So, I'd like to get a video up every other week. I'd love to do every week, but right now it's just not possible. But thank you all for sticking around, and yeah, that's all from me. I'm out. Peace.